How do we feel about short stories?
Good.
Yeah, lots of them.
All right, phenomenal. Okay, so as you may or may not know, I'm here to talk about short stories for a couple of reasons. One, because Sue's let me know that y'all are putting together an anthology. Has everybody here submitted to this anthology?
Yes.
Not yet.
Okay. So hopefully, if you haven't already done that, this will be a good way to make some headway into that. The other reason I'm doing this is because I'm actually going to be running a kind of expanded version of this for the Spokane Library. So starting on Sunday for 4 weeks, every week at 1 at the Shadle Park Library. I'm going to be running some short story workshops. And so that is called From Start to Finish. So the whole goal is to get folks who may or may not have ever written a short story to get started, get through it, and then have something at the end that they can
Which library?
finish and send out. Shadle Park. Shadle Park Library. So if you are interested in that, I think there are still a couple slots left. You do have to register for it. I'd love for people to show up to every single workshop, but if they don't, that's life. It happens. So I'm going to do a sort of a condensed version of that today. And so I would love to talk about just how to put a short story together. So
when does that start, did you say?
that starts this Sunday, so May 24th. I realize it's Memorial Day weekend. Nothing I can do about that. That's where they put me.
Where do they say, where
And
is it?
so the next one would be June 7th and then June 14th.
Okay, so yeah, it's at the Shadle Park Library. It starts May 24th, and then there's one on the 31st, then the 7th and the 14th, so it's 4 weeks. And those are going to be at 1 o'clock at Shadle Park. If you like how I talk about short stories, would love to see you there. If you don't like it, sorry.
Can you go to one, or is it the whole,
So the way that I'm running it is it's a whole extended thing. So if you can make it to all of them, that'd be great. If you can only go to one,
yeah,
and if you get something out of it, fantastic.
okay, thank you.
You know, it's community writing programs. I'm always sort of people are going to show up or they're not going to show up. That's how it happens. And as long as folk get stuff out of it, that's what I want. Okay. So, how many of you consider yourselves really experienced short story writers? You really know how it works. Okay, a couple of you. How many of you have not ever finished or written a short story?
Oh.
Okay, fantastic. And how many of you are kind of in between, in the middle? All right, perfect. So the goal of this is that no matter what your experience level is, whether you are super, super experienced, whether you have maybe written a couple and never done anything with them, or whether you've never written anything before, that you'll be able to get something out of it. If you're super experienced, maybe you can take another, a couple of tips and tricks from other people. And if you've never written anything, and never written any short fiction before, this is a good place to get started. So the goal for today is not to have a complete short story written, because that's a tall order, but to have kind of the bones of one. So the way that I want to talk about it is structurally. So we'll talk about kind of the beginning of the short story, the middle of it, and the end of it. And so the way that I'm going to do this is we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about, how to get started, what makes a good opening, what makes sort of a good middle of a story, what makes a good ending, and then we'll do a little writing exercise for each of those. So we'll write for about 10 minutes at a time, and then we'll take a break at some point, and then we'll do that for 3 times. And if we have time at the end, I would love to get some folks to share, but we might not, so don't want to set that expectation. So I just kind of want to start with an open question, because I like doing this discussion based, for those of you who remember the last time I was here. When you sit down to write a short story, whether you have or not, and you're looking at a blank page, how do you get started? What do you do? What's the first thing that you do?
I already had the idea.
Okay, where did that idea come from?
Anywhere and everywhere. I see something. Oh, I could make a story out of this.
Okay, so something in your life
Yeah.
that you noticed.
A lot of it is related to, there's one that's a whole series,
Mm-hmm.
and I do name plays on the women's basketball team out at Easter.
Mhm.
I do this every other year. And the hero and heroine in the stories, you know, go from one adventure to another, and you know, I gotta work in some way their first names and their last names in order to get them into the story.
Got it. So you picked
And
up.
so that it kind of forces me into, okay, I'll have to go this way here, you know, get all of these names in, you know, and so it kind of fences me into how I can do it.
Yeah. So you kind of picked up specific details and you're
Yeah.
working them into what you're working on. Because I know that this is something that a lot of people struggle with. Is like, okay, you have a blank page and you want to write something. So what do you do? So what are some other strategies other than pulling things from your life? Yeah. Go for it.
Well, I write from my life. Mine are memoirs.
Okay.
I have a world of adventures in the years I've lived. So every time something gets in my head, I sit down and write about it.
Mhm.
I have to, of course, do rewrites and stuff.
Sure.
Like that, but I get the basic ideas down and then work on it from there.
So do you ever fictionalize it, or is it always nonfiction?
There's most of it, no, I don't really fictionalize it.
Okay.
No, it's pretty true. If there's a couple of things, most everything's very uplifting and fun and lighthearted. A couple of things that are tough, I've kind of done it in the second person.
Oh, okay, interesting. I want to talk about point of view later because I think
Okay.
that's a really cool strategy. What are some other ways that we can just kind of get into it? Yeah.
So there's theme-based kind of things, like I do a Christmas letter every year.
Okay.
And at the beginning, I have a Christmas vignette, which is a short. And so you can use it. I've used a theme a couple of times
Mhm.
to get going on something.
So when you say theme, you're referring to just kind of like a broad topic, like I want to write something.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a Christmas story.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a theme.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah, because when you say theme, I'm also thinking like you could be talking about like an argument. You have an argument that you want to make, and so you want to
I see.
get something to fit that argument,
Yeah,
which I think you can do also.
I have one of those too, yeah.
Got it. So what are some other strategies?
Well, the one I just gave you
Mhm.
is a story that I wrote in third grade. That's the first story I ever wrote. And I don't remember all of it, and I don't have the original anymore. But I remembered the plot, the basic plot, and I thought I could make a story out of this, so. And it worked.
Yeah, I think like pulling from fragments of things that you've already done is a really good strategy. Is this something that people do struggle with, like actually sitting down at the page and going, what do I write?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways that I think about this is as synthesis, right? So I every once in a while will have conversations with people about, okay, like what is originality? What does it mean to write something that's really original? And my answer to that is always, well, it's you taking bits and pieces from everywhere and putting them together in an order that feels fresh and new. And so you could do this by taking things from your life, which a lot of people do, or you could do this by taking things from things that you read, which is what I often do. Is I find myself reading something and I go, oh, that's an interesting detail. What if that were different somehow? What if I wrote a story about this, but more like me, more in my voice? So I often find myself pulling not just from things that I'm experiencing, but from things that I'm reading, things that a story that somebody may tell me about something that's happening way over there that I'm like, that'll be pretty interesting. Or often, like, I love writing about people's jobs. So if somebody with an unexpected job comes up to me, I'll ask them a million questions about it. I recently met somebody who works as a mortician, and I spent half an hour just grilling her about how it worked, and she was super happy to talk about it. Okay, so you have all these ways that you can kind of sit down and get started, or you can always pull up a prompt. So I run a group at Spark Central called Drop In and Write, and I usually have a prompt for everybody every week. So I'll just be like, write something in the second person, and then folks will go off on that, and that usually seems to get people going. So once you have started that, once you sort of are sitting down and you're like, okay, I kind of know what I want to write about, what's the first thing that you write? Like, what makes a good opening or an effective opening?
Catchy title?
Okay, so just catch it out. How do you come up with a title?
it's a process. I kind of figure it out as I'm writing the story, what I want to highlight about it.
So you usually don't figure that out until after you've already started writing?
Sometimes the title's there
Mhm.
when I start, sometimes it isn't, and sometimes I have to change it.
Yeah. I find a lot of people tend to title things after they've already written
Yeah.
a story. Sometimes I will come up with the title first, and I'll sort of treat that as a prompt. So we'll go, what's a really weird combination of words, and I'll have that be the title, and I'll start writing from there. Okay, but so once you're past the title, once you've gotten to the first line, what are we looking for as readers in an opening?
Something that catches our interest soon, because a short story, you don't have much time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially, so you're talking about your anthology, you want it to be 1,500 words or less, is that correct?
That's about right, yeah.
So that's really short. There is not a lot of room. You gotta hit the ground running. So we're kind of talking about a hook, right? Something to
Right.
like, how would people define a hook? I'm always interested in how folks define this. What do you think about a hook in terms of writing?
I
Yeah.
don't know. Marilyn Lango used Snoopy's hook, which was a dark and stormy night.
She did.
They made 2 movies out of it.
I love that book. I hate that
I
first
do.
sentence. So what actually is a hook though?
Well, it's something that grabs your interest right away. I can't remember how I started that one, but I know early on, it wasn't the first line, I don't think, but
Mhm.
early on I incorporated this little jingle that we used to say when we were doing jump rope or jumping on the bed.
Yeah.
And so that was, and I kept going back to that through the story, that was part of the thing.
Because it's something that's a little bit out of the ordinary that a reader's
Yeah,
gonna go,
yeah.
okay, that's interesting. The way that I always think about a hook, which is maybe just a way of slightly rephrasing what you already said, is anything that gets a reader to move from the first line to the second line, or from the first paragraph to the second paragraph, I think of as a hook. So anything that you can go, okay, you want to keep going, because as soon as the reader goes, this is not worth my time, then you have lost them and it's not a good hook. So what are some examples of things that you think of as good hooks? Like, how does this work in practice?
Oh, let's see.
Can you think of any from stuff that you've read that you're like, oh, I love that, I
They
want to
call
keep
me
going?
Ishmael,
Why is that?
because you wonder how come.
Yeah. So this,
That's the beginning of Moby Dick, so, right?
yes, it is. Yeah, that's the first sentence. It's called me Ishmael. And the thing that I find really fascinating with that first sentence is just because it's imperative. Because part of it is, okay, is that his name? Because it's not my name is Ishmael. It's call me Ishmael. So it's a command to the reader. The other thing is that there's a missing piece of information, as you said. It's like, okay, why do we call him this? So I'm always thinking about structure broadly, but about a good opening as how do you sequence the information? What do you want the reader to know when? And so if you think about a first sentence, you want the reader to have enough information that they are grounded in the story, but you want to withhold enough that they feel like they want to know something that's about to happen. So they want to know a who or a what or a where or a why. And there are writers that disagree with this. So Kurt Vonnegut very famously said, to hell with suspense, just give the reader all the information they need up front. And I think they can work. But I think if you look at a lot of Kurt Vonnegut stories and you read the first couple sentences, you're still wondering things. You still want to know information that he's not giving you. So the other, were you gonna say something, Sue?
Oh, I was just gonna say, J.K. Rowling on the first Harry Potter book, it was the end of the first page where she wrote her hook. And she was always talking about the Dursleys, and I go, what, this is supposed to be about Harry Potter,
Yeah.
you know? And that was a hook in itself. And so I kept reading it, and at the bottom of the page it said that the Dursleys had a secret.
What?
They had a secret.
Oh.
And you wonder what the secret is. You turn the
Right.
page, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things I've done is I brought in a couple examples of things that I think are working in terms of their beginnings, their middles, and their ends. So I brought in a couple short stories that I really like, and I want to use these as an example of like what makes a good hook. So this is a story by our Spokane's very own Lena Crow. If anyone knows her, she's pretty fantastic.
Who did you say it was?
Lena Crow.
Oh, okay.
So she wrote this story called Sinkhole, which I really like. And I just want to read the first couple of sentences, because I think that this is a good example of a pretty strong hook. The real estate agent showed us the house on West Garland Avenue and insisted it had everything we wanted. Look, he said, there's a fireplace, granite countertops, crown molding, and a large sinkhole in the yard. My husband Alex and I laughed because we thought he was kidding. No, really, the real estate agent said. We told him we didn't want a sinkhole. That was not an item on our list. We agreed on this with absolute certainty. Back then, we always agreed with absolute certainty. Okay, so
Sinkhole.
what's the hook here?
The sinkhole.
What
Yeah.
if they would have sold a house that had a sinkhole in
Right.
the yard?
There's so much information that we're given. We're given information about the house. We're given information about like what the sinkhole is. The story is called Sinkhole, so we assume that's what it's about. But we're wondering, like, what's the deal with this real estate agent who's like trying to sell the house based on a sinkhole?
Yeah.
Who's telling them about this? And what's the deal with this couple who are like, okay, we don't want that, but maybe let's willing to consider it. So we have a certain amount of information, but we don't have other information. Okay, so what are some other things that are good hooks other than like, okay, we have certain amounts of information, but we don't have others? What are some other like things that grab our attention right off the bat?
The only thing I can think of about, and I don't know if this is part of catching the hook, but if you establish the norm first.
What do you mean by that? Can you unpack that?
Well, yeah, establish the everyday occurrence,
Mm.
what usually happens, and then deviate from it.
Yeah, so the way that I like to think of that is grounding, broadly speaking.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one way to ground a reader in a story is to get them really immersed in whatever the time and place is. So one way is establishing a norm. The other way, just more simply, is to introduce some physical details. So I'm sure we've all read, stories that start with, the cliched Madeline L'Engle example is it was a dark and stormy night, as we know something about the environment. And the reason that I hate that is because it's, used so much and because it doesn't actually tell us that much about the kind of storm or how dark it is or whatever it is. So if we have some really specific sensory information, that's always just a great way to ground the reader right off the bat. So if you're like, okay, here's a specific physical detail, you as a reader are going, okay, now I know how this character feels, or what they're seeing, or what they're hearing, or what they're smelling, and you can kind of get into the world of the story that way. And I think that establishing a norm is a good example of doing something really similar, right? We're showing the reader a routine. The danger of doing that is that the reader might start to go, why am I just reading about this person's routine day? And so then you have to kind of drop what the Dursleys had a secret as quickly as you possibly can, especially if you're only working with 1,500 words. Is anybody familiar with the concept of a story structure that's sort of embedded in a single sentence?
Well,
Maybe if I say this sentence, you might recognize it. Has anybody ever heard somebody once, but so then? Is anybody familiar with this sentence?
What was the word?
Somebody once, but so then.
What is the word?
Somebody once, but so then.
I don't understand the word.
Never heard
So
of it.
that's kind of the story
It's not a-
structure. You're
Yeah,
saying.
so this is a sentence, the goal of which is to encompass a very basic story structure in one sentence. So you have character, you have somebody, they want something, but something stands in the way,
Oh.
so they do something about it, then something happens. So I find this a really, really useful shorthand, and not every story is gonna fit into this. I think once if you're somebody who's written a lot of short fiction, you start to play with those components and you go, okay, well, what if I don't have a person who is wanting a thing in this, really obvious, straightforward way, and you move things around. But I think for a really, really basic kind of skeleton of the story, it's really useful to think about. So when I think about what makes an effective opening, and once you get past that first sentence, right, the first sentence is, or the first paragraph, or the first page, or however much room you have to play with, that's your hook. Once you get past the hook, the thing that I want to know as a reader is, who is the story about? What do they want?
Oh.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
just thought of another one. I can't remember the whole sentence. It's from Gone from the Wind. Starts out, Scarlett O'Hara was not beautiful, but the Tarleton twins something, something, something. So right away, you wanna know what
Yeah.
what their opinion is, what's going on.
That's a fantastic example because we know who the character is. We kind of know what she wants. We know what her situation is. We have a lot of grounding information. So it's not quite establishing a norm, but it's establishing, okay, where are we? You know, we are really, really oriented in the world. Okay, so I want to read one more example of an opening that I really like that's not quite doing that. I'm just going to read the first paragraph here. So this is a story called Karenang. It's by an Indonesian writer named Eka Kurniawan. I love to teach this story because it's really short and it's really weird. We brought one home to keep as a pet. Baby, our 4-year-old, loved it. How could he not? It was like a living doll, and gentler than any breed of dog. The only thing that had us worried was that it was obviously no ordinary mutt. Where it came from, it was called a Karenang, and its most distinctive feature was that it walked on 2 legs. So that's our first paragraph. What's our hook there?
I wanna know more.
Yeah, because
We wanna know what kind of creature it is.
Right.
I mean, it could be a gremlin.
But we're getting some sort of implied information in that first paragraph, which is what I like. It was like a living doll and gentler than any breed of dog. The only thing that had us worried that it was obviously no ordinary mutt. So because we get dog and we get mutt, we kind of know that it looks like a dog. Like we're kind of getting that implied information, even though we're not told right off the bat. But we also know that it walks on 2 legs, and so we're immediately going, oh, that's weird. Like
Yeah.
we're given this almost establishing a norm. We're getting this like, okay, we're talking about a pet, and then immediately it's pulled out from under us, and we're getting that really, really quickly. So we don't know who the story's about yet. We know it's in the first person, right? Because we brought one home to keep as a pet, but we don't really know who the character is or what they want yet. But we know where we are. We know kind of their relationship to whatever the hook is. So the reason I picked those 2 examples is because I think that there are 2 ways of kind of getting this information across to a reader. So I'm assuming we're all familiar with the phrase "show don't tell."
Yes.
Okay, I hate this phrase, but I'm gonna since I saw a couple people shake their heads. Basically, is the idea that if you are imparting information to a reader, the more effective way to do it is to do so through physical details or through showing the reader performing some action rather than telling the reader, displaying the character performing some action rather than just telling the reader, oh, the character feels this way or the character's doing this thing. I don't think it's always true, but I think it's a strategy. I think showing and telling are both kind of tools in your toolbox because it's useful sometimes to tell a reader, okay, the character is, shaking and crying, and you kind of can infer how they're feeling. It's also useful to tell the reader, hey, this person's sad. And sometimes one of them is going to be more appropriate than the other. So when it comes to an opening, I think sometimes it's really useful to ground the reader in a physical space and make them infer a lot of this information about who we're talking about, what they want. And sometimes it's really useful just to tell them in a really straightforward way, this is who the character is, this is what they want. Any questions so far? Phenomenal. Okay, so what I would love to do is have us do a quick writing exercise.
I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
When you say establish a norm, what do you mean by that?
So this was what Sue was talking about earlier, which is essentially that you are giving the reader a sense of whatever the baseline of the story is, right? So if you have a character that is going to be going on some adventure, you maybe first want to show them peacefully at home so that you kind of understand what their norm is, what their routine is. And then you get to see them kind of out of their element. I think that this is really effective in some places and not so much in others. But like if we think about The Hobbit, for example, right? In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, and we kind of get a lot of information about what a hobbit is and who Bilbo is, and then he gets, sort of pulled into this adventure. So that's a good example of starting us off by establishing a norm. And I think the reason it really works in that context, even though it's not, a short story, which is what we're talking about, is that we are dealing with an environment that's really unfamiliar to us. And I think as readers, we're sort of naturally drawn to like, oh, this is a weird thing, I want to know more about this. And so it's easier to do the thing where you're establishing a norm if you don't know as much about the environment. All right, any other questions, thoughts, queries, concerns? Any other just general thoughts about openings? Because I would love to hear. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I have kind of a story about books,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about Mac Davis, songwriter and singer, and I guess he had already written a few songs or whatnot, and his agent said, "You need to write a song with a good hook in it."
Mm-hmm.
And so he started thinking about it, and so he wrote one, and the hook is hook.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. And one of the things that I think is interesting about that is because when we talk about hooks in songwriting versus in writing short fiction, for example, we're sort of talking about the same thing because we're talking about a thing that's catching somebody's attention. But the way that we want the audience to respond is a little bit different. Because when we talk about a hook in literature, we're talking about what's going to make them keep reading. If somebody's listening to a song, you know, either it's on the radio or they're probably going to listen to the whole song, but you want them to listen to it again.
Yeah.
And again, you want it to get stuck in their head. But you can also apply that to writing. You can go, okay, what's the thing that's going to make this memorable? What's the thing that's going to make a reader come back to this or keep thinking about this? So I think it's a useful way to think about it. Okay. I'm gonna ask y'all to do a little writing exercise. So however much you end up writing here is totally fine. What I want you to do is write 2 different versions of the same opening. So you can either write an opening sentence, an opening paragraph, if you're really fast, an opening page. And in version number 1, basically what I want you to do is go, okay, I have a character, and the character is gonna have a goal, and communicate that as directly as possible to the reader. So go, okay, here's the character, here's what they want. In version number 2, you're gonna try to communicate the exact same information without saying it outright.
Without saying what?
Without saying it outright. So imply all the same information.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so however much you get through of each opening is totally fine. So I figure we'll do that for like 15 minutes, because
So you just want the opening,
yeah, so 2 different versions of the opening of the
So-
same story.
but it can be more than one sentence, right?
Yes, yeah. If you want to just write 1 sentence, that's totally fine. If you want to write a couple of paragraphs,
Okay.
however much you get through. But 2 versions of the same opening. Any questions about that before we get started? All right, phenomenal. So yeah, let's write for like 15 minutes or so, and then we'll take a quick break.
Oh, she had paper, I think she.
Yeah, if anyone needs
Yes.
paper, what's the?
I have